Hi, and welcome to DigiDate, a visual novel podcast. I'm your host, Nellsie, and recently Milo and I watched The Kissing Booth 2 on Netflix.
Okay, I was really excited to see your intro. I'm glad that this is where you've decided to go with. My name is Milo, and I think The Kissing Booth 2 is bad.
I think The Kissing Booth 2 is bad. Milo, I know that we have to get into our podcast soon, but for a moment I want you to imagine that we met Dawn in episode 3. I want you to imagine, or episode 1, maybe?
It was episode,
we met Dawn.
It was sometime.
So we, the audience, and everyone met Dawn. Imagine for a moment if you went to college and Dawn hooked up with somebody who looked exactly like you, but Latino.
Yes, exactly like me. Almost uncanny. It was a weird experience to see the rival love interest, and then Nellsie said, "Oh my god, he looks just like no." And then I just laughed so hard because it was horrifyingly
all I could
true.
think about. It was all I could think about, but
before we get completely off track in our ADHD brains,
let's talk about Monster Prom.
Yes, let's talk about Monster Prom and what Monster Prom is.
Okay, so I think I could take this one over. Monster Prom is a multiplayer dating sim with a focus on stat management. It was released in April of 2018. Now, I want to make note that Venom was released in October of the same year. Coincidence?
What? Their numbers.
This was at the height of the trailers. Everyone was making their tweets about his tongue, alright? I want you to think about this, Milo, because it's been living in my mind for a little while, right?
I'm trying to see the connection.
The connection is that, and this is one thing, I think that Venom really brought the act of being a public internet monster fucker to popularity, and Monster Prom supplanted it.
Yeah, I think in some way Monster Prom is that. And while I won't lie to you, I do have some gripes personally with the amount of horniness the game has. It is very, you know what? They stand in their truth.
They stand in their truth, and it's a horny truth. A horny, horny truth. And that brings us to...
Yes, I should say a little bit about what the game kind of is gameplay-wise. The gameplay to me is a combination of visual novel and board game, which is very interesting to me because not to sound like a nerd in like a teen movie, but I love visual novels and I like board games. I'm weirdly fascinated by board games as video games. So this game is interesting in how it sort of combines those two gameplay styles to me, because on one hand, visual novels, on the one hand, like what you're trying to do essentially going through this is you and your friends are competing to get a date to prom. So it's like sort of you guys both having this like round table date session, which is really fun to sort of play with. Though I think if you're going at it, if you are somebody who is incredibly visual novel focused in terms of the depth of a visual novel, this is just a fun game for friends. Don't go in here expecting some Citizen Kane. It is just a fun like board game visual novel mix.
It is very fun. I will always remember I had not heard of Monster Prom until a week before it came out because a friend asked me, "Have you heard about Monster Prom? It seems like something right up your alley," and showed me a trailer, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna spend $15 on this. And I did.
Now, you have a much better reaction to that. Whenever I first heard about Monster Prom, I made a friend play it with me in person, and we both at first were like, well, she was not very into visual novels. So whenever we started playing it, she was very much, like, not having a good time. And then we got to the point where we were both going for the same person. And then shit hit the fan, but it was very fun.
Yeah, it's a very fun game, especially with friends. I have played Monster Prom single player a lot of the time, and I do enjoy it single player. I think you can enjoy it almost to the level you would a regular visual novel if you're going to play it single player. Yeah. That being said, I always prefer to play with friends just because it's a fun social experience, and also you get to do a funny little voice.
Yeah, we do this thing, which I'm actually not, like, other people I've played Monster Prom with don't really do this. I don't know if it's just maybe just the different friend groups I hang out in, but, like, whenever I play with Nellsie in our friend group, we all, like, read it out loud, which I just think is the best way to do it. to play Monster Prom?
Yeah. I think that it's similar in, like, any game where it's heavily text-based. I think doing a voice is generally more fun. It is going to depend on how often you've played the game, if you have people who are new to the game, and also, like, what scenes you've seen enough of. Because sometimes you'll play Monster Prom with people who have played the game so much that they just don't want to rehash a bunch of scenes they've already seen before. But I always find it fun to just redo the scenes, even if I've seen them like 1,000 times. It's fun to just hear somebody do a funny little voice.
Yeah! I enjoy it because I like doing funny voices. And also because I like to commentate while my friends do funny voices. It's fun for me to comment on.
It's always really interesting. I am interested in, this is one little tidbit that I just wanted to get in really quickly, but I am interested in one day with our friend Percy playing the Yogg, which is a game that Monster Prom was heavily inspired by and influenced by. The Yogg is a choose-your-own-adventure fantasy game, and, like, the events are randomized, so you'll be able to get multiple endings. And so Monster Prom was pretty based in that. I don't know to what extent, because I've never played the Yogg, but it does intrigue me.
I am interested in that because I do like this concept of a board game and visual novel. Because I think you could have a lot of interesting ways to go about it. I would love a Clue-style game like this.
Ooh, that is a very good idea.
Actually, don't copyright, because that's actually an idea I had for a game. Copyright!
Trademarked!
Trademark, don't steal, please! I think this idea of mixing visual novels with board games is really interesting. But you have two sort of options to go through. You can play, like, a longer game or a shorter game, and you go through, like, a whole... You see, like, there's two days. You go through a week, essentially, right? Like, it's different weeks?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you go through... With Monster Prom, you go through different weeks, and you essentially play through one day of each week. And then you go through the weekend. So that's like the middle, that's like the separation between each week, is the weekend event is either going to be a big group event where you have to remember your friend's stats because you'll have to pick one of them, and if you pick somebody whose stats do not line up with the requirement, you are going to fuck both of you over.
Yeah, you've destroyed them.
Or the event is going to be what Owl and most everyone else will call a wingman event, where one of the love interests for somebody else in the game is going to approach you and ask you if they should pursue this person. And depending on your relationship to that person, most times you're going to say, yes, that's my friend, they're cool. But sometimes either you'll be an asshole or you're competing against them for this person's affection, and so you'll say, no, that's a shithead.
No, that person does not want love.
That person doesn't deserve your love. I always find it particularly funny, specifically, and I want to be clear, this podcast episode is going to, as all of our podcast episodes do for everything, have spoilers for Monster Prom, if that's something you care about.
I was about to say, yeah, I guess, if there's spoilers for Monster Prom.
But, with one of Scott's wingman events, I think he has 2, but I could be wrong, he asks you what kind of sport your friend is. And you can say that your friend is chess, and the game will actually narrate and go, you were kind of just saying this to fuck with your buddy, but now they're actually gonna get dumped for a football, which is hilarious.
I remembered that. That was fun, yeah. I think Monster Prom really shines in just how it kind of plays around with the idea of you're with friends. Your friends are reading this. You're making your friends read out this crazy-ass dialogue. And in turn, they're having to also, like... There is some other competition besides these weekend events. For example, there's the cafeteria stuff, right? Where you can go to different tables.
Yeah. So, depending on player order, there's the cafeteria stuff. If somebody sits at a table you were supposed to be at, it can fuck over you somehow. Especially if you're going for a route like Scott's, which is mostly dependent on having a certain amount of social hearts with him.
Yeah.
However, you also decide player order. You can either randomize it, or you can go in a competitive direction, and the game will give you a prompt. It'll be like, select an object, and so somebody will go like air freshener, and somebody will go the Bible. And then it'll be, like, player order is decided by how likely you are to get arrested for having this object on a school grounds.
Yeah.
Which, then you have a big argument about
Which is fun. Honestly, I think that is, having that as a kind of ingenious as a way to get people to start talking. Because it leads to, I think, one of my favorite parts of us playing it.
Yeah, it is super fun. We ended up in an argument at one point because it was, we had to pick a person, and I had picked Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And I forget what the exact prompt was, but when I said Jesus Christ, it started a whole argument, competing him against, I don't know, some other fucking person.
There was a lot. I'm trying to remember, but there's a lot of shit like that. I know there was a lot of stuff where, like, one of us would pick something and then it's us trying to, like, oh, I remember this distinct one. It was, like, pick an action or something, and then you had to, how likely you were to get kicked off a plane for doing it. So one of our friends had shitting. I think I had shitting. Either I had shitting or fucking.
Yes. You had shitting, I had fucking, I remember.
And then our friend had sleeping, I think. And then we were...
And then another friend had jacking off, which I had gotten in an argument with because I said, that's too similar to what I said.
That's too similar, and then that's too funny, and then I was like, I stand firm in this. Even though you can shit on the plane, I'm just assuming that you're doing this to get kicked off.
See, the whole thing is that the whole argument would be, are you shitting in the facilities of the plane, or are you shitting yourself on the plane? Because if you're shitting yourself on the plane, I think it's grounds to get kicked off.
Yeah, so it's a lot of just, like, deciding what the pedantic way about it is, and it's kind of fun to just sort of, like, talk to your friends about if you get kicked off a plane for shitting, you know?
A big barrel of laughs.
If you want to talk to your friends about getting kicked off a plane for shitting, that's up to you.
Yeah, and so a lot of the gameplay elements of Monster Prom kind of follow that line where it's just based on the social aspect, and then the actual gameplay elements such as the stats. So I'm going to explain the stats really quick because it is something that will take a moment to understand if it is your first time playing the game. So, here's how Monster Prom stats work in the easiest way I can explain it. Your stats, which are smarts, creativity, charm, fucking fun, and money. Those are 5 of them, and I have to hope that's all of them, but, and boldness. And so those stats, depending on the number you have in each of them, will determine how an option is going to go for you. So in a traditional visual novel, you have a right answer and a wrong answer. And your wrong answer will send you into a different path that is just going to get you rejected, right? And your right answer is static, and it's going to lead you into a good path, right? In Monster Prom, it depends on your stats. So say if you're talking to character A and character B, and character B is like, yeah, I don't know, I don't want to go to jail for shitting on a plane. And they're like, what should I do? And character A is like, I think you should shit on that plane. And you get 2 options, and one of your options is like, I think you should shit your pants on that plane. And it's like you getting behind it. And say that's boldness. And option 2 is, I don't think you should shit on the plane. And so if you picked option 2 and option 2 is like smarts, but your smart stat is like, and your smart stat is lower than your bold stat, answer 2 is going to be wrong. But say you played again and you got that same event, and your smart stat was at a 10 and your boldness was at a 3 or something, and you're a lame little coward boy, and you said, I think you should shit on that plane, then it would be wrong to shit on the plane.
It's sort of like, there is no right and wrong answer. All the answers are inherently bad, because they're just, weird answers. But what you're focused on is which one will make you appear, like, based on your stats. Is this more of a bold answer, more of a charming answer? So don't be like me and go, okay, which one of these is like, this one sounds more like a good person answer than being fucked.
Yeah. And it's going to end up, so that's why you get a lot of these situations where when you're playing Monster Prom with people who haven't played the game before, you have to sit down and explain to them essentially like how it's going to work and what are the patterns between answers. Because when you play the game multiple times, you're going to pick up on some of the patterns between answers. So like with charm, it is usually the flirtier answers, the things that have to do with socializing, giving speeches, stuff like that. With boldness, it's usually any answer that involves violence. And it's stuff like that that's going to connect it. That being said, it's a mixed bag. I really enjoy the gameplay mechanics of Monster Prom. I find them creative, and it gives a sense of novelty to the game in a similar way that the multiplayer does for me, where I'm like, I don't get this in a lot of dating sims, so it really fascinates me. That being said, it is a mixed bag because I don't know how many of you like having a game explained to you.
Yeah, that can be kind of the problem with Monster Prom sometimes, at least for me, is that I did not know how to correctly play Monster Prom for at least a year of having the game, which is a long time to go about assuming that I was how to play the game and not knowing, because I had played it on my own.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where you discover new facets to Monster Prom depending on how long you've been playing it. I didn't realize until a while after I started playing the game that you had certain stat requirements to reach with certain characters depending on, like, the length of the game you're playing and if you're playing multiplayer. So if you're playing single player and you're playing the full game, you have to have, like, crazy amounts of stats to be able to win with a character if you're not getting a secret ending. And secret endings will override your stats if you get all your events correct. So it's stuff like that that is sort of in the weeds that you figure out later on that it kind of makes it made it fun and engaging for me, but I can understand how it would be super frustrating for somebody else who isn't, like, trying to have a game explained to them. Like when your grandma plays solitaire and you watch her play a few rounds to understand it.
Yeah, that's why it kind of reminds me of a board game in that way. Where some board games, it just, you have to, the explaining part can be a lot of the game, and if you don't really have a friend there, but I don't think it's 100%, like, I think for me, Monster Prom is interesting about the fact that I didn't know how to play it for a long time, but I still enjoyed it, because I think Monster Prom is one of those games where you really can just sort of, if you're with friends, you can turn off your brain so fully about how to play the game that you're just sort of like, which one should I choose, guys? I want to hear more funny dialogue. I want to hear you say more funny dialogue. So you're not really, like, focusing on it. Which sort of became for me, where my friends, all of y'all, would be really invested in your routes. Whereas I am just like, I'm gonna go for whoever I can get my hands on. I don't give a shit. So I would just go for the shopkeep most of the time, because I just have to leave and come back.
Yeah. And I think that's a good transition into, because Monster Prom isn't only a game where you have to keep up with your stats, it's also it's also a dating sim.
Yes.
And so how does it stack up as a dating sim? Well, then let's look at the characters.
Ooh,
so
smooth as butter.
Smooth as butter. Really aced that segue there, like a mall cop. But
wow, Paul Blart. Wahoo.
Oh, but God. So, there are two things that we need to establish here, which is that we're talking about the main romanceable characters of the game. Monster Prom has several bonus characters that you can romance if you get different items at the shop. Those are event characters. And there's also the Second Term DLC. The Second Term DLC almost feels like a different game. The Second Term DLC introduces two main romanceable characters, several other DLC, not DLC characters, well, I guess technically, yeah. It introduces several other DLC characters, and in general makes the game feel a bit fuller. So, we're going to be talking about...
It really does. Not having it, and playing the game, playing with your friends who have the Second Term DLC, and then playing on your own for your podcast of your own game that doesn't have the Second Term DLC, feels so sad. It's just...
Yeah.
Very sad, but go on.
So, let's talk about the base game characters first, and then I'm going to talk about the Second Term DLC characters because there is a specific note I have to make about both of them. So, base game characters, we're going to start with Damien. So, a couple of notes here about Damien. He's a demon. He is the prince of the 7th Circle of Hell, which is, you assume, the wrath part.
Oh, I didn't realize that, yeah.
Yeah, he's a very angry little man.
He's got issues.
He's got mad issues, but mostly he just likes being violent and yelling. And I'm proud of him, personally.
He's fun.
He's very fun. I want to make space for Milo's biggest note about Damien. You want to talk about his sprite?
If I don't talk about this, I will be hung in Times Square by my feet. I have to talk about it legally. Damien has this sprite whenever he smiles that when I first saw it, I lost my mind on call. Because I guess I just never saw it before. And he smiles like a pet show dog being raided. Every tooth in his mouth, he gleefully shows for. He opens his mouth,
his molars,
so wide to show you his molars, every little tooth. He's a joyless pet show dog displaying every tooth for raiding. It is so weird, and I adore it.
Yeah, I always get such joy out of you describing that sprite. It's so funny. I also want to be clear that Damien yells. If you have the sound effects on in the game, half of Damien's voice lines are him yelling.
Turn the sound effects off. I'm sure the voice act. I don't know the voice. Well, there is the one voice actor who sucks, but like I don't know the voice actors. But I just want to say, turn the voice acting off for me because I will immediately go like either they breathe into the mic, or B, I'm listening to them yell and I feel like I'm having an out of body experience.
Yeah, I would say this is a really particular thing, especially if you have misophonia of any kind, turn the sound effects off. I can deal with the sound effects because I like some of the voice cast, and we're gonna put a pin in the voice cast because...
Shithead, known shithead, cryotic.
Yeah, we're gonna put a pin in the voice cast of Monster Prom, because it is pretty star-studded, especially with known shithead cryotic. But then, back to Damien. Because, this is just a fun fact for you viewers, we had to re-record this episode because it was all over the place. It had 8 different tangents.
Yes, we only got 8 different tangents, and we were only 30 minutes in.
So Damien, he is, and I'm going to say this tentatively, but I'm very confident in it, the most popular character in Monster Prom.
Don't even say it tentatively. He is, from what I know of the game, as a somewhat outsider. Especially compared to you, which we'll get into. Damien is incredibly well liked. You can always hear whenever our friends play it, because there's always someone who wants to go for Damien typically. He is well liked, he is well loved.
Damien is super well loved, and I think part of that is that he's a big angry character, but he also has moments of tenderness, particularly his drag route, which is the nickname I'm gonna give it, which I'm pretty sure it also might be called, where he does have a passion for makeup and fashion. That rhymed unexpectedly.
I did not know that was around.
It is. There are certain details about Damien that I think kind of brewed together made a very popular character. And they're gonna sound like small details, but when you put them all together, they paint a very charming picture. He has anger issues, and he's generally pretty violent, but also he has these joke moments where he's just super woke. He has 2 fathers, and both of his fathers are described as the most loving parents who always support him. He has a route where it's based in the fact that he's embarrassed about the fact that he's super into drag, not because his parents wouldn't be okay with it, but because they want him to be the Lord of Hell as his career. And so it has this comedic edge to it. He's also just a very loud demon character.
He takes up your attention. When he's on screen, you don't forget that he's on screen, especially whenever he joylessly shows every tooth in his mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also points where he has these little embarrassed moments where he's got his little pink blush sprite, which I don't think is super important, but it is to people who love him.
Oh yeah, he's got little blushy cheeks, yeah.
Yeah, and there are also there are lines from Damien that just have become kind of iconic within the game. Specifically, there's a point where the narrator, I think, or perhaps another character refers to him as a spicy red baby, and I remember this specific line because nobody will ever let you fucking forget it.
They're like, do you remember whenever he did that? Wasn't that great?
There is a Dakimakura official licensed merch of him where he's wearing a shirt that says Spicy Red Baby Adult.
Spicy Red Baby Adult.
Damien won a popularity poll on Twitter, and I think possibly Tumblr was also involved, but he won a popularity poll that allowed him to get an extra bonus secret ending where he punches the sun. So I'm not pulling him being the most popular out of my ass. I'm willing to say that there are characters that also are at equal levels of popularity, but honestly, I doubt it.
I don't think so. I really don't. I think Damien is also the first character I knew about from Monster Prom.
And also we're gonna put a tentative pin in Damien just for when I get into my particular history with Monster Prom.
Yes.
But moving on from Damien, I'm gonna bring us over to Liam. Liam is a mixed bag.
I don't like him. I'll be honest with you. You know this, but I don't like the man.
Important information is that Milo is an art student.
Yeah, I know and have met at least 20 Liams in my life. And now I know another one.
Yeah. Liam is a mixed bag of a character. He has some funny lines. He's funny sometimes. As a character concept, I get some laughs out of him. I can't say I like him. I don't.
He has that line for me of just like, he's the pretentious art student kind of type. He's an artsy guy. He's like putting filters on his Instagram pictures. He's constantly checking Instagram. That's his whole thing, which is fine, except that it's like, oh, I know people like this though. Like,
Yeah.
Like with Damien, just like this big angry demon guy who's like kind of sweet. It's like, he's funny because he's yelling about punching the sun. Whenever Liam talks about responding to people's Instagram pictures, like with a gif of Duchamp smoking a cigarette, I'm like, I can't.
Yeah, Liam particularly, his whole character concept is being a hipster vampire, and he does the part very well. He's very well written for that, but it does make him genuinely quite insufferable.
It reminds me a bit of Yick, who also has a hipster character in it, except Yick was 100% unironic.
Yeah. There are good moments for Liam. I'll say this because I've played the game so much. There are very good endings for Liam if you're interested in him as a character. I particularly like the Prom King ending for him. It has this little sprinkle of genuineness that you might like. That being said, most moments with Liam are just, oh god, I know this person in real life. Also important to mention that Liam is the aforementioned character voiced by known shithead Cryotic. He's no longer going to be voiced by him in the sequels, but it's important to know.
I didn't know it was that. I always thought it was just one of the protags. But
no, it's Liam, and they're gonna replace him for future games. They put out a public statement,
okay,
but
good.
you know.
But yeah, Liam for me is just, me and Dawn have very same opinions on Liam, which I find very comforting. Because I think a lot of our friends our friend loves vampires and is willing to forgive Liam because Liam is a vampire, and all of our friends have mixed opinions on Liam. I don't like him. I don't like him.
Yeah.
I try so hard, but every time he talks, I just go, God damn it! It's funny, but it's like he's just like this hipster dude, and I'm like, oh god, I just can't. I don't want to do this, man.
I will say, I know so many people who play the game. And I could name you one of my friends whose favorite character is any of the main romanceable characters, or even one of the side characters, but every person I know whose favorite is Liam is deeply embarrassed about it.
Yeah, I find that very funny that our friends who like Liam are deeply embarrassed about it. And or it won't even, like, other people will go, don't get Damien or whatever, I'm going to go for him this route. No one ever says that about Liam, because who's going to go for Liam?
No. I will say kudos to the writing staff. You really do get the insufferable waft off of Liam.
Yes, 100%. They nailed it with that, to the point of where I just go, oh god, I can't.
Moving on to Miranda.
She's cute.
So, I'm a really big Miranda fan. She was my favorite from day one of the game. She is a mermaid. She is a princess of the merfolk, and she is also a genocidal tyrant.
Yes!
I adore her. She is such a bizarre concept for a character that came together in all the right ways for me.
I never had any opinions on Miranda, but like I think in friendship a lot of times you sort of inherit people's favorite characters, and I think Nellsie talking about Miranda has made me really like Miranda, because I think she's just really interesting as this character who is just straight up like, oh yeah, I'm in a dictatorship, I run it. Like, okay. Yeah. She just sort of moves on.
So much of Miranda's writing is so particular. I can remember so many inside jokes about her, or not inside jokes, but just in-game jokes about her that are so weird that they just get me a lot. Particularly, Miranda's kingdom is in a war with the, quote, air people.
Yeah.
Who she has no problem cannibalizing, by the way.
Yeah, I think the thing about Miranda for me is just the fun of her is in the details of just the weird way her thing runs, like her eating serfs, which is where she doesn't eat.
Yeah.
She has people that show, like, are her eating serfs who eat for her.
Mm-hmm. They eat for her. She has a particular fixation on silverware. She has different names for different spoons.
I did not know that.
Yeah. She's super cute, and she's so weird and violent, and I have a great love for her as a result of that. I'm always super into aquatic characters of any kind. That's just a fixation I have. And so Miranda hit a lot of buttons for me. I also just find her incredibly funny as a concept. She says things that make me laugh.
Yes, and Nellsie is I'm not gonna make you do it like I did last time, but Nelsie's a voice for Miranda that is like a little bit of a lisp, and it made me like Miranda because it's just very cute, of this very cute like lisp character talking about like, oh yeah, you know, I'm going to murder people. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. I really do love doing my Miranda voice. I don't have a line from her offhand, otherwise I would volunteer myself to do it. I'm very conceited. But maybe one day. But moving on from Miranda, who I love, we're gonna move on to Polly.
I like Polly.
So,
Polly's fun to me.
Polly is very, very fun. So, to explain Polly's character concept, she is referred to in the game as a party ghost.
That's a good way to describe it, honestly.
Yeah, so Polly is super into the party scene. She's very outgoing. She's very into drugs.
Yes, she loves drugs.
She's a big drugs fan, and it makes sense because she can't die. She's already dead.
Yeah.
A lot of Polly jokes get me a lot because it'll be something like her going, "What? You can't do super MDMA?"
I understand people. So I know we have friends who really don't vibes up to her, which I understand because I think she could be a little bit too sexual sometimes. But I do really like her. I like Polly personally because I like her concept. This idea of this ghost who loves to fucking party, and just sort of the most fun I have with Polly is with the drug stuff, and more so her just being like, yeah, I came here to like just fuck around and have a good time, and she's like yelling all the time. I love it. It's so fun to me.
Yeah. Polly is so fun. I like her interactions with other characters a lot, because a lot of her interactions with other characters, and I'll get more into this later when I talk about character relationships that got me, but they're just fun. You really get the sense that Polly is friends with everybody in the game, which you don't get for some of the other characters. I have a hard time believing that Damien likes any of these people. I have a hard time
believing any of these people tolerate Liam.
Yeah. It's a stretch for some of them, but with Polly, you do feel that she has an appeal for genuinely everyone in the cast. Yes. And there are moments with Polly, specific running jokes with Polly are she constantly references different reasons for why she died. It's worth noting that Monster Prom is in the same group as Dream Daddy and Doki Doki Literature Club, where they had very big fandoms starting out, and they're still moderately popular and people reference them a lot, but they're not as, so they all came out in a similar time frame. So there is a particular Doki Doki Literature Club reference in the game where Polly says, we could start a literature club, or maybe not, because that's how I died.
That's pretty good. I think out of the first term, Polly is tentatively Polly is my favorite.
Yeah, out of the first term, Miranda is my favorite. And moving on from Polly, I also want to put an asterisk here. This is just a note I have to make for people when I play the game with them. Polly is a ghost. I understand it's easy to think she's like a water or slime girl of some kind. She is just a ghost. You can see it. Her midsection is transparent in every alternate outfit.
I've never met somebody who didn't know that she was a ghost.
I've met people who did not believe she was a ghost.
Oh, okay.
It's odd. I'm gonna get more into this with particular art notes that I have for Monster Prom, because I really like the Monster Prom art. There are particular notes I have to make about it. But that being said, Polly is a ghost. It's weird for me when people don't know that, but I can understand where it comes from. So, moving on to Scott.
Oh, I like Scott a lot.
I like him. Scott is, okay, so Scott is a werewolf and also a himbo. He has no brain up there.
I don't know, maybe I should have said so soon that Polly, I don't know if I really have a favorite then in the first term, because I do like Scott. I just like the fact that Scott's whole thing is that he is a werewolf. If every, like, werewolf trope joke that you heard, like, werewolves piss on fire hydrants, was real, he's just a big dog. It's very funny.
He's just a big dog of a man, and it shows. Scott is also one of those characters where I do genuinely believe he's friends with everybody else in the game, except Liam.
Yeah.
Scott has these moments where characters will talk to him and they'll be like, who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? And he immediately plays into it. He talks about pissing on things a lot.
Yeah, he talks about sports a lot, because he's on the football.
He's a sports ball boy. He talks about sports. He's just in general, like, when people were getting really crazy about himbos, they were talking about Scott.
Yeah, he's got no brain, and it's very fun to see. Sometimes it can be a little bit, it's very silly, I think. It's very silly. So all of Scott's writing is, like, silly.
It is, and I like it for that. Particularly one of the big things that gets me is Scott and Polly's friendship. Scott and Polly are part of a duo in the game called Prank Masters with a Z. Scott has a voice line where he specifies that it's with a Z.
I didn't know that!
Yeah, it's so... Scott's voice lines in particular are very charming for me. Scott has two voice lines that get me, and his voice lines that get me are with a Z and wink. He just says wink. It's also worth noting Scott is voiced by Aaron Hansen. That Aaron Hansen. That Aaron Hansen.
I don't hear much of the voices, but that is cute to me.
And then we have Vera. Vera is the last of the base game romanceable characters. And so stay with me here. Imagine a Gorgon who is also a capitalist, who is also a feminist.
Yes, she respects herself who is a woman. She wants, but also wants profit.
Yeah. It is interesting to me specifically, and we're gonna get back to this, but I remember specifically when I was looking at somebody making writing notes about Vera, and it was if I remember correctly, it was in the context of somebody asking whether or not it was okay to headcanon Vera as a lesbian, because they got that vibe off of her. And it was one of the writers talking about how she was written to be a feminist because that seemed to fit into her character. And it was tangentially related. I don't want to make it seem like that just came out of nowhere in that discussion. That's just how I remember the discussion beginning and what I got out of it from one of the writers when I was watching this happen.
Vera is like
she was
girl boss kind of situation.
Yeah, she is. Which I find it really funny. Vera is a criminal.
Yes, she's extremely capitalist, extremely money hungry driven. And it's very funny to see these ways that she'll just be like, oh yeah, I'll do it for $10. Like, it's very funny.
Yeah. I get a lot out of Vera. She is one of the characters I would lump Vera in with Miranda and Damien, where it's over-the-top villainy.
Yes. Over the top.
They're the triad of over-the-top villainy, whereas I would put Liam, Polly, and Scott in like a triad of just funny, gimmicky.
Yes, I think Vera does not have any, is very open about, I don't have any good intentions.
Yeah, and I like that about her. I have this particular thing where with Vera, this is just one observation I've made, but Vera is just very popular with not only every lesbian I know, but also every non-binary person I know. I don't know what the connection is.
I don't know either. I wonder that too. I think it's just maybe that Vera's just very confident, maybe.
Yeah.
Because I think she's got a lot of confidence.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I really like Vera. She is not my favorite character, but I just appreciate a lot of her writing, and a lot of the jokes with her land a lot. I said the phrase a lot. It's
just fun to hear about her scheme. She's a similar thing to Miranda, where I enjoy hearing about just their schemes ideas, like ideas for what they're going to do, and I'm like, oh, that's funny that they're doing X, Y.
Yeah. So that moves us into the second term DLC. Where we'll talk about the last of the romanceable characters, the main ones. So let's start with Calculaster.
Calculaster is gonna hit a soft spot for me because I'm a big fan of robot characters. I love robot characters. I tend to be really connected to those. So Calculaster got for me because he is what I would like to call the first Monster Prom character who is just a good person.
Calculaster is a very fun character for me. I think he's super sweet and just super cute. Like, that's one of the big appeals for Calculaster, is just how cute of a character he is.
He's so cute. I love Calculaster. I get a good kick out of Calculaster just because he's just a good dude. It's just this computer that wants to be loved. That's very cute to me, and I think it's interesting to me about having this computer that is just like, there's no gimmick. Like, the gimmick for Calculaster is just that it's a robot.
But yeah, Calculaster's gimmick is mostly that he's just nice. He's a nice, good boy.
He cares a lot. He's a robot, and he wants to be loved, and it's very good for me.
Yeah, Calculaster, specifically the humor regarding Calculaster gets me a lot, because usually humor revolving Calculaster is fun little robot humor. There's a particular bit that always gets me for whatever reason, where he and Vera are talking, and Vera tells him to forget something, and he goes, going to last conversational checkpoint, and so he says the same line that he said before again.
Yeah, I love that stuff. It's fun. Or he'll talk about a number, and he'll say the number, like, write out the number, like, 1, and then in parentheses he'll put the... it's very fun to me, I don't know. Maybe it's the coder in me, but I'm like, haha, robot humor.
Yeah, I think he's just super cute. And moving on from Calculaster... Oh, before I get into this, I want to make a note about Calculaster, and this applies to our second term character as well, but Calculaster was in the original game. Calculaster was one of the characters you could unlock through the shopkeep, right? And so he got an updated appearance for the second term DLC because he was very popular. Or not because he was very popular, but also because the writers liked him, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that also applies to Zoe, otherwise known as Zigord, who is one of the characters from the Shopkeep. Zoe is my favorite character in Monster Prom.
I like Zoe a lot. Zoe also, I will say a lot of Zoe, though, definitely came from hearing Nelsie's initial reaction from my first time ever seeing her, and seeing Nelsie so excited. I was like, oh, I like Zoe.
Yeah. I have a lot of love for Zoe, and part of it is because, and I'm willing to say this now, I liked Zoe even before she was a fully main romanceable character, because I was super into her character design.
It's a good design.
She has a really good design, and it really appealed to me. Like, I look at Zoe, and it's like, I look at Zoe, and not only is she a really well-designed character, it's also pretty naturalistic from her first design, because in the first game, you don't see her updated design until the Polaroid at the end. So in the first game, she's mostly just an amorphous blob, which is also fun. But her updated design is super, super cute, and also a lot of the stuff she does, because she's meant to be sort of a Eldritch-inspired design, so she has a lot of eyes and mouths, and one of her arms is a tentacle. Yeah. Legend. And so a lot of the motions she'll do, like a lot of the alternate emotions she has in her sprites are like her hair, which is also tentacles, will go down and you'll see one of her big eyes get super red and aggressive. It's like really dynamic character design that I like.
It is. It really is.
Yeah, I was super fixated on Zoe even before she was a main character. And when she became a main character, I thought she was going to be way more insufferable than she was, because when I heard her character description, it set me off a little bit.
When I first saw Zoe, and I first got Nels first described to me what she's like, I immediately went, I'm going to hate this.
Yeah. And there are moments where, like, Zoe will make jokes where I'm like, I don't know if that's specifically my thing, but I actually ended up liking her a lot. So this is one of the big things that is going to come up later in the podcast when I talk about my dark Monster Prom past. But specifically, I have a sordid history with fanfiction. And so when it was uncovered that Zoe's character was mainly going to be based around the fact that now that she's entered Monster High, Spooky High, alright? We can't say Monster High. Trademark. So now that she's entered Spooky High, she's also become a really big fan of all of her friends, and so essentially her whole character is writing friend fiction about her buddies.
Yes, which if you've ever met someone who's done that before, you know that it's whenever you hear that, immediately alarm bells should go off your head and go, oh no. But it's honestly
wee-oo.
Not too bad, I feel like. I don't know why it doesn't bother me as much as it should.
It doesn't bother me that much, and I guess the specific reason why it doesn't bother me is, one, it's framed in a way where the other characters find it weird or are sometimes offended by it, but it doesn't impact their livelihood in any way, nor does she say anything super unflattering about them.
No, and also, I feel like at least they keep, at least from what you can tell me if I'm wrong, from what I watched, there wasn't a crazy amount of talking about specifically relationships of the other characters as much, like getting in detailed about their love life and stuff. It seemed more like just her writing stuff about just her elaborate fan fiction, and it wasn't really focusing on, I want to see these two, like, people kiss.
Yeah, there are jokes where it's like her shipping other people with each other, but I think, who the fuck? Give me 1 second, let me pause my Audacity recording. So there are mentions of her having shipping in her friend fiction, but that doesn't particularly bother me either, and I think part of it is, one, within the fictional narrative, I'm already willing to give leeway for Damien committing murders. Like, I think that's it's the relativity of it all. I wasn't super annoyed by anything Zoe did. One, because I find her super charming as a character. She's generally more chill about her friend fiction, her weird friend fiction, than any person I've met who had this sort of behavior in real life.
Yes, she's, yeah, I feel like she's also just, she's not, like, I don't know if this is true, but it just feels like she's not as invasive about it. Like, she wants to know stuff, but doesn't feel like, with Liam, whenever he talks about his shit, it's like, okay, man, I know, like, I know that you do this stuff all the time, but for Zoe, I'm like, okay, I'm willing to suspend that she is something past this friend fiction thing, whereas Liam, I think, is just all hipster.
Yeah, I also get charmed by a lot of, one of the specific running jokes with Zoe is that one of her favorite ships is Garfield and Naruto, which is... Yeah, there is this Polaroid. So, I'm gonna tell you this for all you Monster Prom fans who want to see the cutest thing in the world, but there is this Polaroid where if you play as Oz or Yellow, and you romance Zoe, there is a good chance you'll come out of the game with the Polaroid where she and Oz are standing there cosplaying Garfield and Naruto. It's the cutest shit in the world.
Aww.
It also came up, and I hate that I'm going to bring up these Dakimakuras again, but Zoe's Dakimakura has her in a Garfield bikini.
Oh, God.
It's the most insane bullshit, and it makes me laugh.
To bring a little bit about Zoe. Zoe is actually canonically like a trans woman, right?
Yeah, Zoe is it's complicated because it's not exactly like Zoe is M to F, more so like she
Blob.
is, yeah, she's an amorphous blob and also an elder god, that has, now identifies as a woman, but it's pretty explicit in the narrative that she is essentially a trans woman, especially considering the fact, and this is a cringe line that is so well-meaning that I feel bad criticizing it, but it's so desperately cringe, is when Vera is talking about her and says it's sisters, not sisters.
I was hoping so bad you were gonna say that! I'm thinking about that, and a lot of this will kind of, I guess, transition us into the writing portion, but...
Yeah, I have a note on this.
The thing about Monster Prom is that sometimes it'll go into a very special episode, and it can sometimes make the whole room, like, the tension, like the fun you're having with your friends, go completely down, because you're reading 5 lines about asexuality, and it's like, this is cool PSA, but we're playing a game. I'm trying to... play a game with my buds.
And it's one of those things where, like I said, and, I don't think everybody feels the same way it is. It's so well-meaning it almost hurts to criticize it, but it is just, like, one of those things where I put a specific note here, which is that it gets too on the nose. Like, the PSA-like writing would be fine if it were more lamp-shaded in a way. And what I mean by this is, and this is a particularly complicated note I'm going to make, so stay with me here. Monster Prom has a real problem with lamp shading as a writing tool. And what I mean by this is specifically, one, this is about Joy. So Joy is a member of the Coven, who are a group of characters where their bit is that they're in a TV show. And I love Joy. She's a super fun character. Her and the rest of the Coven are really fun for me. But I don't like this specific category of jokes regarding Joy, where Joy is the only plus-size character in the game. For the most part. There are 1 or 2 others, maybe, depending on your definition of plus-size, but Joy is one of the more plus-size characters, and she's plus-size in a distinctly, curvy way. And so this is mentioned in the game a couple of times, and it's like, it's not a fun joke because they know they could do better. You get me? I don't need you to pander to me. And it's one of those things, because I have a high tolerance for this kind of thing where it's like, I get it. And I wouldn't have noticed, I'm going to be real with you, I wouldn't have noticed that Joy was the only plus-size character if the game hadn't pointed it out to me.
Yeah, honestly.
It wouldn't have been in my mind, and I think that's part of the problem is, now that I know this, it kind of just feels like, okay, bud, but you could have just made another one. It doesn't.
If you're gonna point that out, maybe you could do something about it.
Yeah, and I get, the idea there. It's just supposed to be a funny haha joke, so I'm not super upset about it, but it's just one of those things where it's a writing flaw that it points itself out to me from playing the game. That being said, now my second point becomes, with the PSA-like writing things, I'm going to bring up 2 examples. There are 2 examples of this. This is Zoe's secret ending regarding her identity. And there is the Kale ending, and I didn't mean to sigh before I said that, it's just that I played it so recently, and a friend got that ending, and it was the longest shit in the world.
I think I was there for both of those. I was there!
Yeah. So, Zoe's identity ending. Now, I'm gonna go on the biggest, take here. I like this ending. I like it a lot, actually. I think for a game that Monster Prom is sort of towing the line where it got really popular in a way that isn't really expected of a game that has the options it does. And what I mean by this is Monster Prom is one of the only games that I got to play where you got to have they, them pronouns, that you got to choose your own pronouns.
I really like that.
And I really, really like that. Monster Prom was always, like, a really trans-friendly game in terms of just, like, the visibility of it all. And it got super mainstream popular. Like, it had a BuzzFeed playthrough.
I did not know that!
Yeah. And so, I think it's objectively a good thing that Zoe got to be essentially the fantasy equivalent of a trans woman, and got to have, like, this PSA-typed route where it was about her being accepted by her friends and about intolerance being, like, either explained through, where people had to learn to be better, or not tolerated at all, in the case of Leonard, who is a character.
Leonard is funny to me.
He's extremely funny to me. That being said, there are certain things where it's like, it's a little over the top.
Yeah. Sometimes he'll talk about, like, trans stuff, and I go, man, this is just, I've heard this directed before, so it's a little bit hard to listen to.
Yeah, and so I find Zoe's route regarding her identity to be super sweet and super well-meaning. That being said, it's just...
much! It's a bit much, guys!
It's a bit much. And, like, I don't mind it so much, and the ending is heartwarming enough for me to like it. But let's round that out with the fact that, and this is just my big thing, like, it's a little much. It's just so much. Specifically Vera's line where it's sisters, not sisters.
It's sisters, not sisters.
And I personally like it for, like, all my other reasons, but it's just, it gets to be a little much sometimes. Now, I will say, I specifically have a feeling about why Vera specifically had the "it's sisters, not sisters" line, which is that Vera is specifically, like, a character who labels herself a feminist, and this is just an inclination I have, and I don't think it's true at all, but it is a really funny thought. I do think they just specifically wanted to make sure you knew Vera wasn't a TERF.
I think about we're sisters, not sisters, all the time. Yeah, that's a sort of representation of, like, the way the writing is sometimes for those scenes. It's like, it's very well-meaning, but it falls flat on its ass a lot of the time whenever it's trying to do this more serious stuff. Yeah. But I don't mind whenever it falls flat on its ass, because it feels like it was, like, trying.
Yeah, and, like, that brings me to my second example, which is the Kale ending. So Kale is one of the endings you can buy from the shopkeep, where you buy a conspiracy board about why you haven't seen Kale around, right?
Yes, we played the Kale ending very recently, so I will have more fleshed out thoughts of this.
It's fresh in the mind. So the whole Kale ending is, and I'm gonna have a direct contrast for this, but the whole Kale ending is based around the fact that you are pushing the boundaries with Kale, who personally is, and this is the twist, sorry, if you haven't played Kale's ending and you want to, go open your game and take the next 15 minutes to do that. But... specifically, Kale is asexual and aromantic, and so you are pushing your boundaries with him in pursuing him in, like, to an uncomfortable degree. And it's supposed to be, like, an ending where it's supposed to make the player character reflect on themselves. However, it's just long. Like...
you feel like you're making him uncomfortable.
You can feel yourself making him uncomfortable.
And this is a game. This is a board game. You're like, usually you're playing with friends, and we were playing it with our friend was doing the route, and every time it would be like, haha, funny Miranda joke, and then Kale would come in, and we were just sitting there as our player character just makes Kale uncomfortable.
Just sitting there quietly, just...
no one saying nothing. We're just reading the lines, and we're like, damn.
You know, and, like, I get it. I think the ending would have been fine if there was just less exposition. I don't think...
Long. There's like 6 or 7 dialogue panels of the coach, not even Kale, the coach explaining to you what asexuality is.
Yeah, and this is a broad stroke statement, and it may seem a bit contradictory when I was just like, oh, but, you know, putting trans stuff in the mainstream I think is important because a lot of people are underinformed, but I don't think anybody who's playing Monster Prom needs asexuality explained to them. Now that being said, I wouldn't have minded it so much if it was just less of this dialogue. Like, it is very long, and I think, A, it could have been shortened, or B, it could have been lampshaded in a way similar to, and this brings me to, the Dimitri and Interdimensional Prince ending. So, Dimitri and the Interdimensional Prince have an ending that you can buy from the shopkeep as well. Their ending is essentially that they are both extremely #problematic. They both just kind of push people's boundaries and don't have a lot of respect for people's space. And part of that is that you end up in a polyamorous situation with them after they figure out their relationship. And it has a funny little line in the epilogue where it's just like, and maybe they're a little problematic, but maybe you're a little problematic too. and I find that funny.
That is funny to me. I didn't mean to I meant like a laugh, but it's funny.
Mm-hmm. It's extremely quite funny to me. So, I like that one, and I just feel like if there had been, like, if it was presented in an obviously, like, humorous, like, a very special episode way, but you could take genuine advice out of it, it may have been more tolerable. But as it stands, these particular endings get a little bit preachy in a way that is, like, a little bit unpleasant.
Yeah, not even, like, with the Kale stuff specifically what got me, even with the Zoe thing, with the Zoe thing less so, but I feel like with Zoe stuff, at least it wasn't the protagonist. Having us, the protagonist, like, making Kale uncomfortable.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, and then at the end, it's like, oh, we were a dickhead. It's like, yeah, of course in video games, in visual novels, you can be the person who's wrong. But it just feels very like, okay, I just feel, like, icky.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to be... It's supposed to be a fun board game I'm playing with my friends. But it's like, it's a weird note to leave. Because that was actually where that was the last person choosing. It was a friend who got kills. Like, at the end, it was just like, okay.
Alright. That's great, bud. So, yeah. That being said, I did like this fun little foreshadowing thing. And it was complete coincidence that it happened in our game, but I found it cute, which is, where Milo was going after Calculester in this same game, and there's a point where, it's a funny little bit where a character is trying to convince Calculester that he's dating his plant. And if you pick the right dialogue choice, he has a moment where he's like, well, actually, most plant species are asexual and aromantic, and knowing Kale's ending, I was like, oh, that's fun. Fun little consistent world building.
That is cool. I do like Kale as a character.
Oh yeah, Kale is super fun, and I like his character design a lot. Yeah. I also like that he's essentially just a normal guy.
Yeah, he just likes to smoke weed and play video games.
Yeah. And so now I have some specific notes, because we're running about an hour into the podcast recording, so let me get through some specific notes here that I have.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Alright, so small character dynamics are one of the big appeals of Monster Prom for me. This is a note that is important to only me, but... So, here are some character dynamics that I've listed. Canon facts, which are Damien's crush on Hope. Hope is the small girl in the Coven. Dahlia's crush on Liam. Liam's previous association with the Coven. Joy's previous fling with Dimitri, who is a vampire in the game. And Valerie being Vera's adopted sister, and also Valerie's whole route. It just makes the game feel really alive and fun. Like, you get the idea that every character kind of has their own unique place in the school where they have their own friend groups, but also they've branched out and people generally know each other really well.
Yeah, I like Valerie.
I like Valerie. I like her a whole lot. I think her route is a particularly important one in the game, if only because, one, it is the route to flesh out other side characters. And when you get to flesh out other side characters like that, it gets super, super fun. It's also one of the routes where you get to see the Coven talking not as a unit for once.
Yeah.
Which I like a lot. I think that particularly what it gets out of me is this feeling that Monster Prom has a very genuine writing staff who were very invested in making sure their world felt fleshed out. This is particularly noted in, and this is one of the lampshading situations that I didn't think was stupid, but Hope has an ending in Monster Prom. And Hope's ending is based in the fact that it's playing off the fact that they're in a TV show. And so, you are allowed this thing where it gives you a whole thing where it's like, up here will be tons of exposition explaining the Coven TV show and Hope's backstory. And if you don't want to read a ton of exposition, you can skip now. Which got me.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it was a fun joke, and if you sit down to read the exposition, it's a lot of fleshing out for Hope, which I think is interesting. I think a lot of stuff like that helped to make the game feel like a lot more fun to me. It gave it a lot more replayability, especially single player wise, because I think the motivation to play Monster Prom single player would depend on how you felt about it as a visual novel, and I feel very good about it as a visual novel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a fun visual novel. I think I prefer it a lot more with friends, though, I will say.
Yeah, I do prefer it with friends, but when I play it single player, I have fun just getting, like, little details. So that was a note that I made. And then I want to...
The art?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about the art, and then I'm going to get into my secret backstory.
Oh, yes, yes.
So art. The art is clean and nice looking and snappy. And I like the art for Monster Prom. I specifically like the colors for Monster Prom. I think they all fit really well, and the outfit design is really good. They'll do different outfits for different seasons, and the outfits are always consistently good. That being said, the art does have, like, anatomical errors that anybody who plays will point out.
Yeah, it's hard. I also, like, I'm nervous to speak about it, because I know I have my fair share of anatomical problems, but whenever you're playing it, you're gonna point it out. Like, you don't mean it in a mean way. It's more so that you just like, wow, this dude's abs look like it's like a slip and slide.
Yeah.
It's very, very, like, curvy.
Yeah, and so it's one of those things where, I wouldn't switch out the art in Monster Prom for anything.
No.
I think the art in Monster Prom is super fitting and super good for a dating sim. Like, Milo and I have done some game design together, and typically, like, what you notice with dating sims is that, like, art direction can be pretty important, and you want, like, a nice, clean style for your sprites.
Yeah.
And so I think it's super, super good. That being said, I do get tired of talking about Vera's pencil legs with the art critics in the audience.
I've not brought up that one. Okay? I've not brought up that one. The only ones I bring up is always just his abs, because they're hypnotizingly weird to me.
Yeah, Dimitri has his hypnotizingly strange abs. But, but it's also one of those things where, okay, so I have a detailed note about this. But Monster Prom is first and foremost a game about dating hot people. You don't get a lot of crazy, interesting-looking monsters, which is weird to me because the artists on the team are super good at consistently replicating the game style, but also if you look at their work outside of the game, with the exception of Arthur Tien, who is the main artist, who his art is very consistent and also very good. But particularly who caught my eye is Viperfish, Viperfish on Twitter. Viperfish has excellent art, but also most of Viperfish's job is I should have took the time to learn their name before I did this, but most of his art is very good in terms of just creativity and monster design, like very fucked up monsters too, which I think is very interesting, but also like it feels like the potential was sort of overlooked because Viperfish is personally responsible for designing Milo, who is one of the romanceable characters for Monster Camp, the upcoming sequel.
Not me, just somebody else.
Not our Milo, but are you excited to be a character in Monster Prom?
Yeah, I'm excited to be in it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so
let me voice act it. I'm joking. Don't let me maybe?
We'll see. No.
This game will this episode might be out way before the like way after they get that thing out. But if not, patch me in.
They're gonna spite you. They're gonna have you voice Liam.
If they have me voice Liam, I would still do it. Yeah. I think I would have to do it. I would do it for free.
But, so Viperfish's art is super interesting outside of the game, and it does feel like their potential was sort of overlooked in terms of just most of their job within Monster Prom as a game is to replicate Arthur Tien's style, which is fine, and certainly consistent, but I do feel like, in terms of just, like, the expertise there, I would have liked to see more interesting designs from Viperfish specifically.
You want more fucked up fun designs.
I want more fucked up fun designs. That being said, I do think every design in Monster Prom is fun and snappy and good. And I also think, like, the lineup of talent on Monster Prom, and this is gonna knock two birds out with one stone, is that, and this is part of why I think Monster Prom is so popular and got so popular, is because Monster Prom has a lot going for it in terms of its art. Its art team is very good, its writing team is very competent, and its voice acting team is, like, internet fame star-studded.
Which I think is a smart move, because you're immediately going to get those people are going to promote themselves.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're gonna avoid talking about Shithead Cryotic, but, Shithead Cryotic was in it before he was disgraced.
Before he became disgraced shithead.
Yeah.
Well, he was before that, but now he's known.
Yeah. And other voice actors in the game include Erika Ishii of Critical Role fame, Aaron Hansen, like I said, Jacksepticeye, which is... Oh. Jacksepticeye voices Calculester, and you would not think he did.
I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
I have no opinions.
That's your boy.
I do not have any opinions. I do not know any video game men.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where I'm not even particularly fans of a lot of these people. Like, I recognize that they're very well known and talented, but it's just that, like, the voice cast is so star-studded, which I think is a super smart move in terms of advertising for a game.
Oh, absolutely.
And I also think they're all quite good at what they've done.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't listen to the voices.
Yeah.
Put me in there.
Listen to the voices. They're pretty good.
Put me in there some way I can not hear my own voice.
I could also definitely be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that Nate Wants to Battle, who is a YouTuber that I don't watch, but that I know is very popular, voiced Damien, in which case he did a very good job at shouting.
I think I know, and my YouTube sphere is very limited.
Yeah, your YouTube sphere is the same as mine. But, so, moving on from this is just, those were just, like, points I wanted to make about, like, art stuff and the talent on the team. Yeah. And speaking of the team, so...
Your secret double life?
Yeah, my secret double life. So, when we first recorded this episode, I sprung this on Milo as a surprise, and it was a surprise because... Oh boy, is my history with Monster Prom long.
You have to imagine being me, and I go into this episode, and I have the most... I barely had any notes about the game, because I was just like, it's this game, and I didn't really know too much about it. I had played it a few times, but, I don't know, like, a crazy amount. But I knew Nellsie did, and I knew... But I did not know whenever Nellsie said, oh, here, let me tell you about how X, Y, and Z, I've interacted with X, Y, and Z person. I go, huh? You've what now?
Yeah.
You've done what?
Okay, so... Back in the day, Monster Prom was freshly released in April of 2018. I play it, I fall in love with it. It's worth noting that I had a huge hyperfixation on Monster Prom, and it lives in my head like a brain worm. And when we started playing it again for this episode, I fell right back into that hole.
Immediately, Nellsie did, yeah.
Yeah, so my torrid romance with Monster Prom brought me to looking into the Monster Prom Discord, because there is an official Monster Prom Discord server. It is super crowded. The Monster Prom Discord server is an interesting place because it is a big celebration of fan content. Fan content is really well shared over there. And also, there have been a lot of changes since I was there, and, like, active, because I stop by every once in a while to see how things are going. But back then, when the game had freshly come out, people would go on the server to find people to play the game with. That's actually where I met one of my best internet friends, as it were. Shout out to Worsty out there. It's also where I just met a lot of people who I still follow online to this day, and who I still, like, have positive interactions with their work. Because, if you remember what I said earlier in this video, I have a particular relationship with fanfiction.
Yes, I like that little teaser.
Yeah, so I usually avoid talking about fanfiction because it's embarrassing, and I don't mean it in a way that fanfiction in and of itself is embarrassing, but in a professional sphere, bringing it up unprompted. That being said, it's important for this because my relationship with Monster Prom was mostly fostered by the fact that I wrote fanfiction for Monster Prom, and I felt very engaged within this Discord, because if you look through it, I got kind of popular. Oh. So Monster Prom fanfiction isn't, like, the most insanely popular stuff. You're not gonna see, like, me going out like, I have, 50,000 kudos and somebody made a physical copy of my book. But what I can say is that I did, my most viewed fanfiction on Archive of Our Own is a Monster Prom fanfiction about Damien. And one of the most fond interactions I have, one of the most fond memories I have of the Discord server is that somebody asked just a general group of people, like, what was their favorite Monster Prom fanfiction that they had found, if they had read any, and somebody put mine up, and then somebody tagged me to say that I had been noticed.
Aww.
Yeah, it felt like Monster Prom was a close-knit community where, like, when you created something, you felt like it could get really recognized. And I really liked that about the Discord, but also what I really liked about the Discord was the fact that the staff were particularly active. And particularly when I talk about the active staff, and you do need to keep in mind that the Monster Prom staff are based in Barcelona. So, When I talk about them being active, it's also in between them traveling and such, specifically because one of the main writers is in Barcelona most of the time, and that's Mihail. I have most of my memories of interactions with Mihail because he answers questions on the Discord server about the game. So when people weren't talking bug reports or, I'm sorry, I lost my footing for a second. When people aren't talking bug reports on the server or looking for games, occasionally Mihail would have Q&A sessions or he would be doing promoting material. Or, and this is one of the particular things, people would have complaints about certain content in the game. And this isn't me saying that all content that was opposed to in the game got removed, but I will say that a decent amount of... I felt like the Monster Prom staff did a better job at listening to complaints and sometimes doing stuff about it than I have felt with any other creation.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, I really enjoyed my time when I was very active with Monster Prom, and I'm really looking forward to projects that Beautiful Glitch does in the future, because I think that Monster Prom was such a success because it just has a lot of heart put into it, which you can see when you enter any sort of fan sphere where the creators are around. I was also part of a Monster Prom zine, which did not do well, but...
Okay.
Our zine was officially sanctioned by Beautiful Glitch, or not officially sanctioned, but, like, you know, they recognized it and approved. And, like, it was just nice because I've been a part of a lot of zines, and most zines, if you've been a part of, like, a fan zine, I'm saying the word zine a lot here, of any kind, you know that most of the time it's just sort of whatever. But with the Monster Prom zine I was in, it was fun that the reaction they had when we had the head talk to them about getting, like, it advertised on the Discord server or anything, was that they were like, yeah, we just wish you would come to us sooner so we could advertise it.
Aw, that's sweet, though.
They're super, super sweet. Like, a very good team. And I've looked into a lot of Q&A sessions that they put publicly on their Tumblr and a lot of projects they want to do in the future. And I'm like, and I just think that Monster Prom, like, in terms of just being a game, is super solid and really good. But also in terms of being a community where, like, the staff felt like they put a lot of heart into what they've done. Also, fun part of being in the Monster Prom Discord server, and I couldn't do this because I wasn't 18 at the time, but they also recruited people to beta test the second term DLC off the Discord. I felt so angry that I wasn't 18 at that time, but I just have to imagine, and if you're one of the people who got to beta test it, let me know, because I want to know what that was like.
I am curious. I am very curious now.
Yeah, you needed to be 18 because I think they needed you to sign an NDA, which, you know, makes sense. But I would just love to know what that experience was like. But yeah, that's my secret Monster Prom past.
When we first recorded this episode, I panicked so goddamn hard when Nellsie told me that. Because I was like, my brain immediately went to, oh my god, they're going to listen to this. And I was like, because I'm sitting there and I'm just goofing. I'm not saying anything like really mean, but I'm just like fucking around. And I'm like, oh god, yeah, they could listen to this. And I don't have anything, there was nothing constructive. We were running by the seat of our ass for the first recording. I'd not made any notes. So I was so underprepared to actually talk about what I thought about the game. So I was like, oh god, I don't want to listen to this.
Yeah, I think that in terms of criticism, like, the Monster Prom staff are pretty good at taking it, but also, like, I don't think we've said anything in this podcast episode that people wouldn't come to the conclusion of on their own. And I also think, like, at the heart of any criticism we made of the game also comes with the caveat, it's a slapping game.
Oh yeah, I want to say that also that doesn't mean that I'm holding back from my criticism at all. No, it just means now that it's actually formulated in a way where it sounds like how I wanted it to sound, when at the time I really had not. My thoughts were everywhere.
Yeah. Overall, like, I'm always super, super happy to talk about Monster Prom because I think Monster Prom, in a way, like, kind of changed the game of how I thought about a dating sim, because when you think about dating sims, you usually think about it in terms of a traditional visual novel, which isn't a bad thing at all. There's a reason why traditional visual novels do well, and why we talk about them and have a whole podcast about them. But I also think Monster Prom did a really good thing in, like, trying something different, and being sort of a novelty of a game when it came to its multiplayer and its gameplay functions.
Yeah. Which is what I find interesting. Again, I like board games. I like to watch people talk about board games. I like the idea, like playing online board games. So I like this concept a lot. I think Monster Prom for me, it is definitely like, your enthusiasm for it has changed my opinion on Monster Prom. Not that it was bad before, but it's that I never really had, like, I've sort of grown an attachment to Monster Prom through being able to play it with my friend. And I think it is honestly, it's a fun game to play.
Yeah, definitely. I would wholly recommend, like, and Monster Prom goes on sale quite a bit. If you can catch Monster Prom on a sale that brings it down to $15 or $10, I definitely think it's worth that money if you ever think about buying it. You, listener, I'm looking directly at you, Kyle. Wouldn't it be funny if you were listening and your name was Kyle?
Can I throw out other names? What if we throw out names of our friends, and then, like, people who are our friends and also aren't our friends?
We're looking directly at you. You, listening Percy.
And all Percys out there. Donovan, if you're drawing now, I can see you. It's a joke.
We've taken to grading the games that we review, and I think I would grade specific characters, but there are enough that I don't feel the need to. I like all of them decently enough. I would give Monster Prom a solid S, actually. I really like the game.
Ooh. Yeah! Monster Prom for me, I was thinking a lot about what I want to say. And that's not gonna be a bad grade, obviously. I think it's pretty obvious that I do have a fondness for the game. Though, it doesn't hit an inch for me. It doesn't enough. I feel like I don't know why. But it's fun for me to play with friends. I'm just like the casual Monster Prom fan. I like it when I play with friends. So I would give Monster Prom an A. I do have some like stuff where I think it can be a bit too sexual, and for me that can be kind of uncomfortable to play. But I do like the game. I think it's a fun game, and I'm very interested to see what people, maybe me, do with the concept of a board game and a visual novel coming together.
Yeah, I really think Monster Prom did something special. Also, we're not grading individual characters, but if we had to, Zoe gets an S+. I love her.
If we are, I almost said caduceus. Calculus would probably get my S. I'm a big calculus student. Now, Liam would get an F.
Liam gets thrown into the pit.
Yes, he gets thrown into the pit. I will say, I don't want Liam to be removed, though, because he's fun whenever you're playing the game, and then he shows up, and then, like, half the chat groans audibly.
Yeah, it's really fun. Monster Prom has a sequel that's going to be coming out soon-ish, as of recording this episode, and may have come out by the time we released it. It's called Monster Camp. It introduces a character named Milo, who is a non-binary reaper.
And Nellsie sent me this character, and for a second it just took me a while to realize that it was also named Milo. I was just like, what? Oh, it's me!
Yeah.
That's my name! They took my name!
Yeah, it is, I'm very excited for it. And also they have a couple of spin-off games that they want to make regarding Monster Prom, and I'm very excited for each and every one of them. Very disappointed I couldn't get any of these Dakimakuras they were offering.
I know they didn't know me, but making a non-binary character named Milo, and me being me, who is that? You know, maybe? Slide me a little...
That's your assigned kin!
No! I will say there is differences, though. There's differences. I can't think of them right now.
There's differences. But yeah, sorry, I'm transitioning into an outro. But Monster Prom in general, like, very good game, very excited for the sequels.
That you're transitioning to an outro.
I know. I'm very excited for the sequels for Monster Prom. I'm very excited for the fact they literally cannot keep Damien out of any of them.
Yes, because if they did, they would lose sales.
Damien is such a fun character to be the most popular in a game. But also, this has been DigiDate, our visual novel podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. Next time we're going to be playing XOXO Droplets.
Yes, we are. I'm excited. I think it's going to be interesting.
I think it's going to be a very interesting episode. And if any Monster Prom staffers listen to this, give me a call.
Yeah, give us a call.
Shoot me a little email.
We'll put the email. But hey, you know, I license to being also named Milo. You know, toss me a few bucks. That's a joke.
I do a funny little Miranda voice. Make a bootleg Miranda.
Put Nellsie on there.
Okay, but seriously, this is DigiDate, and I hope you enjoyed listening. Have a good day.
Have a good day.